Welcome to Expert Views on ADR, EVA, a podcast about simplifying the traditional African method of settling disputes or the appropriate dispute resolution, ADR, in a bid to attract more users to settle their disputes or conflicts with mediation, ombuds, collaborative law, arbitration, restorative justice, early dispute resolution, negotiation, conciliation, and of course, early neutral evaluation. My name is DrChinweEgbunike-Umegbolu, the host of Expert Views on ADR EVA video podcast show. I am delighted to welcome Mr. Jonathan Wood to the EVA show. He is the president of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. He has in-depth knowledge and understanding of CIArb, having served 5 years as chair of the Board of Trustees and 8 years as a trustee. Mr. Wood is also an independent arbitrator with over 40 years experience in the field. He wears many hats, so I've left the link to his profile. Welcome to the show, Mr. Wood. Let me stop sharing my slides.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Chinwe.
Oh, it's such an honor to have you here. So without further ado, the first question is, what is the role of ADR, specifically mediation and arbitration, in resolving conflicts or disputes? Thank you.
Well, ADR is the acronym for Alternative Disputes Resolution. And what it means in broad terms is that it is an alternative to resolving disputes outside the court system. It's a non-court system process of resolving disputes. It's an acronym that was first coined by Professor Frank Sander, who was an academic, in 1976. And it was first mentioned to the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators at a conference by, again, an American academic, Jonathan Marks, in 1983. And as I say, it's a method of resolving disputes outside of the court system. You mentioned two methods, that's mediation and arbitration. I think universally, mediation is the most well-known way of resolving disputes outside the court system. Arbitration as an ADR mechanism is different in various jurisdictions. So, for example, in the USA, ADR doesn't necessarily incorporate arbitration because that's regarded as a binding adjudicative process. But mediation, on the other hand, is embraced by the terminology ADR. In the UK, ADR encompasses mediation, arbitration, early neutral evaluation, and adjudication. So there are various ways of looking at ADR, but broadly speaking, I think it's pretty well recognized that it's a process that is outside, although complementary to the court legal system for resolving disputes.
Well, thank you so very much for that insightful discourse. I also wanted to add that some scholars in the early days, even in the 90s and subsequently these recent years, they've argued about arbitration not being under the umbrella of ADR. So what's your take? What do you think about that?
Well, I take the English view, of course, which is that it's all embracing. I mean, anything that is outside of the court system, I think as ADR. We have different acronyms. We have ODR, online dispute resolution. So it's developing all the time. But I think, as a shorthand, ADR, to most people, it's an alternative to going to court, and that's avoiding the state court process.
Yeah. Thank you so very much. I also feel it's appropriate depending on what the parties feel, methods or processes they feel that can resolve their conflict, so they can choose any of the processes appropriate to them. So, all right, thank you so much.
And I have had difficulty, may I just mention, in different jurisdictions. So I once had a very big case, and we might touch on it later,
Yeah.
where I was acting for the Turkish government. And in Turkey, I found it very difficult in the 90s to distinguish mediation from arbitration. They just found that whole concept very difficult. I had to come up with an alternative description, which might seem obvious to many people,
Yeah.
but we chose upon the words of facilitated negotiation rather than mediation. And then they realized that, yes, that was different to arbitration. And it was important because in that jurisdiction, arbitration with state-owned enterprises is unlawful. You have to go to the Turkish court. So I had to make that distinction when I was advising them to resolve a very big dispute by way of mediation. So the distinction is important.
Oh, thank you so very much for your insight. So, how far have they enhanced access to justice and these processes in the United Kingdom?
Well, I mean, ADR is, and mediation in particular, has really taken off big time in this way. Now, I remember as a practitioner in the 90s, mediation was just beginning to take a hold, and there was a bit of suspicion about it amongst practitioners, and even I was a bit of suspicious about its role.
Yeah.
Did I need some third party to help me resolve and negotiate a resolution?
Yeah.
But of course, I was soon persuaded. But recently in the UK, it was about a year ago that we had a case in the Court of Appeal called Churchill versus Merthyr Tydfil. It was an odd case. It was all about Japanese knotweed, but we don't need to worry about that too much. But the importance of the case was that it overturned a previous sort of obiter in a case called Halsey. Halsey had cast doubt on whether the courts had the power to order mediation with a sanction for costs against a recalcitrant party. And the basis of that objection was that it might infringe Article 6 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which provides for the right to a fair trial. But the case came before the Court of Appeal in England and Wales, should I say. And indeed, it was a case in which the Chartered Institute intervened with a number of others to try and educate the court as to the very important role of mediation. And the outcome of the case was straightforward. It laid the foundation for the court to enable the court to order mediation, order the parties to undergo mediation, and to stay proceedings whilst they did so. And as a result, our civil procedure rules have now been changed to allow that to happen, and in appropriate and proportionate cases, a cost sanction can be ordered by the court against the party who is reluctant or does not engage in mediation in good faith. And so that has really heralded a new era in terms of mediation in the UK. And that goes hand in glove with access to justice. Justice, I'm afraid, has become very expensive before the courts. And the fact of the matter is that mediation is very much cheaper and faster. And so that in turn means that it provides people with an opportunity to resolve disputes without the need of court process. And that in turn means that there is an enhanced access to justice in all walks of life, whether it be family law, commercial law, you name it. It's very important.
Thank you so very much. I wanted to touch on the CPR being changed because of the recent case, that is the Churchill's case. And it goes back to the days I was researching on for my master's, actually 2014, and we were arguing about the party autonomy in ADR, especially in the relating to costs, the court sanctioning parties. So, what do you think? Does it remove the party autonomy in ADR with this recent case?
Well, that's a very interesting question, Chinwe, because I more or less I associate party autonomy more with arbitration and the right of the parties to, choose their own arbitrators and that sort of thing. Party autonomy in the context of arbitration is one of the fundamental principles. So, to raise the question of autonomy in connection with mediation, I suppose in one sense comes as a little bit as a surprise to me. I don't think that it impacts the decision of the parties. I mean, it has to be consensual. That's the point. Well, I say it has to be consensual. The court can order it, but it is a consensual process. And it's in that context, I suppose, that where you have a recalcitrant party that's being ordered to do it, to engage in it, that's perhaps, if you look at it in terms of autonomy and choice, if you are being threatened, if you like, with the cost sanction by the court, that in some ways impinges on this concept of autonomy and pure consensual, a purely consensual arrangement.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much for that. So you touched on the cost. I also wanted to expand on the cost and time frame for settling cases via mediation and arbitration when compared to litigation. Is there much difference or impact when you compare these processes?
Well,
thank you.
The short answer is of course. Okay. And I mean, you come from Trinidad. I had the benefit of coming to Trinidad about 8 weeks ago and engaged with your supreme, with the East Caribbean justices, and we talked a great deal about mediation and its benefits. I've also traveled to Kenya this year and talked with the Chief Justice, Martha Koome, about the benefits of mediation. I've talked in other jurisdictions during my term about mediation, because mediation is the one thread, the one thing that in my various travels around the globe in my year as president that has come forward. It is taking effect from Pakistan to Portugal, from Kenya to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. It's very, very important, and it is growing in many jurisdictions. Some are well advanced. I know there are some very strong proponents in Trinidad for arbitration amongst the judiciary, and I had the pleasure of meeting them. And the short point is that it is infinitely cheaper and infinitely more cost effective. And why do I say that? Well, you only need to look at the cost of litigation. I don't know how much it costs in Trinidad, but I guess it's not cheap. I can certainly tell you that in jurisdictions like the UK and in the USA, litigation is very, very expensive. And I often say to people, for goodness sake, avoid court litigation at all costs, even though it might do the legal profession out of work, because it is time consuming, it takes people away from what they're supposed to be doing, and it is very expensive on the wallet. So there are lots of studies have been done. I'm sure you can find academic papers in various jurisdictions, but they all point to the same thing, and that is time and money. It is significant. Let me give you a quick example. I mentioned this Turkish case to you a moment ago. I was engaged by the Turkish government in a very, very big case involving the construction of the highway between Istanbul and Ankara. And they were tunneling the road through the mountains, and the project was hit by an earthquake, which cost millions and millions of dollars. And I was engaged to help the government resolve their dispute with insurers. And I knew we could go to court. There was a Turkish court jurisdiction. I knew that we would be very successful if we went to court in Turkey, acting for the Turkish government. But it would have taken, in that jurisdiction, 10 years. I was approached to see if there was an alternative, and immediately I thought of mediation. And I was engaged in April, and on the 31st of October, we had a resolution of hundreds of millions of dollars.
Oh, wow.
And that, and the cost was infinitely less than what would otherwise have been 10 years of litigation before the Turkish courts. So there's a clear example of time and money having a very big influence. The court system in many jurisdictions, Trinidad may be the same, certainly in the UK.
It's the same. Yeah.
It takes an awful lot of time to get to a hearing in the courts. And so it's inevitable that, time and the longer it takes, the more expensive it is. So it's clear. It's much more cost effective and less time consuming to go down the ADR route.
Good. Oh, thank you so very much, sir. But some scholars have argued that arbitration is fast becoming the new litigation in terms of cost as well.
Well, I agree. So arbitration, the byword for arbitration used to be economy, expedition, and enforceability. And I'm afraid that the three E's of expedition, economy, and enforceability, certainly it's still capable of enforcement, with the New York Convention. But I'm afraid in terms of an economic way of resolving disputes and even speed, it's losing its allure in that way. Big international arbitrations are becoming very expensive and are akin to court litigation. The advantage of arbitration over court litigation is probably twofold: confidentiality in commercial disputes, which is very attractive for the parties, and of course it's perceived as being neutral, depending on which institution or where you choose to have your seat. It's perceived as being neutral because nobody wants the other party to have the hometown advantage of its own court. So it has that attractions, but I'm afraid it is now becoming a rather expensive plaything, I'm afraid, for resolving disputes.
Well, thank you so very much for highlighting those advantages and disadvantages associated with arbitration and when compared to litigation as well. So can we sort of highlight or review the history and evolution of the history of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators?
Well, as president, you can imagine I'm delighted to do so. So the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators is, as I say, a chartered institute. It's based in the UK. It was established, it's currently established by Royal Charter, and it's a registered charity here in the UK. It started out in 1915 by a number of people engaged in the construction industry. In fact, I think the founder was originally an architect. And a group of them got together and thought there must be another way of resolving disputes without going to court. And so they started meeting and grew slowly in the UK. And in 1927, they set up an education committee. And in those days, its primary purpose was described as being a learned society. It was to promote, learning in connection with this alternative way of resolving disputes. So the Institute grew slowly. Its growth was interrupted, if you like, in some degrees during the Second World War. In the meantime, you had other institutions such as the ICC established in the 20s. And in the 1950s, it was struggling a little bit. It had about 2,000 members, but there was a call to arms to say, look, we've got to pull ourselves by our bootstraps. We must expand and promote the role of educating people in relation to what was then arbitration. And there was then a campaign, if you like, of expanding its reach as an educational entity in a number of foreign jurisdictions, in Australia, then in places like Kenya, mainly jurisdictions that were part of the British Commonwealth, if you like, where it had an attraction. And so it grew in the 50s and 60s, and it has continued to grow. It received its Royal Charter in 1979. It was just a mere institute then. The Charter was reinvigorated to allow further developments in 2005. And on my watch, to increase its governance, which was very important, it was, again, the Charter was renewed by King Charles III in 2023. And we're now at a stage where, if you think back to, as I said, to 1950, we had 2,000 members. We now have 19,000 members, and we have 44 branches globally. So it has nearly grown from 2,000 to nearly 20,000. Let's hope by next year in 2025 we hit the big 20,000 mark. So yeah, it has evolved, and as I say, its main purpose is that of being a learned society and providing education and thought leadership. It establishes what should I say, ethical standards around the world, and that sort of thing. It's a thought leader in educating people and providing an ethical basis for arbitration.
Thank you so very much. So, was there any obstacles or challenges faced during the formation or creation of CIArb?
I don't think there were challenges. I think it was regarded as somewhat novel in the early days, but there was clearly a need in the sort of early 20th century. I wasn't around then, you may be surprised to learn, but I haven't read of any particular obstacles. I think the sort of obstacles that one has come across in more recent years, and that is it embracing not just arbitration but other forms of ADR. There has often been a debate at board level, should we change the name to the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators and Mediators, because not only do we train arbitrators, but we train adjudicators and mediators, so and they can get chartered status as a result. So that's the sort of issue that vexes us from time to time.
Oh, thank you so very much. I think I'm up for the change of name to Chartered Arbitrators and Mediators, because looking at the name, if you're not so familiar with CIArb, you could just say, oh, it's just arbitration. But I know they train, CIArb trains mediators as well, and done so much training and educational activities centered around mediation as well. So I think I should be up for a change of
one of these days. It won't be on my watch, but I mean, it's very interesting. Mediation has become so important. Just another example. in Kenya,
Yeah.
all the Supreme Court justices under the leadership of Martha Koome, the Chief Justice, they all had to take the Pathways course to fellowship in arbitration,
Yeah.
and she's a great proponent of ADR.
Oh,
She's written books about it
yeah.
on the three doors to resolution of disputes. Mediation's critical in all of this.
Thank you so very much. And so much changes as well in Nigeria, especially with the mediation acts being
Yes.
changed or reviewed or amended now. So,
Well, it's taking hold everywhere as
yeah.
mediation. As I say, it's the one theme that came right to the fore during my presidency. It was the growth of mediation around the world. I mean, if you went to some jurisdictions, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
they'd throw tomatoes at you, the legal profession, if you were suggesting mediation, because they fear that it takes the bread off the table,
Yeah.
and it takes some persuading, but once they embrace it, they realize that if they provide a good solution to their clients, the clients will come back. So, it takes a bit of education to say that this is the way forward.
Oh, okay. So, what does it look like? The arbitration and mediation process at CIArb. What does it look like from the start to the conclusion?
Well, that's quite an interesting question, and I think what's important to say is that the Chartered Institute does not provide. It is not an arbitration institution in the same way as perhaps the ICC or the LCIA in London or Stockholm Chamber of Commerce or SIAC in Singapore. These are all institutions with their own rules, but the Chartered Institute does not itself run arbitrations, nor does it run mediations.
Okay.
It has schemes which it farms out, but it is a thought leadership and education institution. So people come to us and say, can you run this arbitration? And we say, well, that's not our job. We can educate you into how best to resolve your dispute by arbitration or mediation, but we will not do it ourselves. We do have our own set of rules, which, excuse me, if there's an ad hoc arbitration, then people can use the CIArb arbitration rules. They're very up to date and, well practiced, but we don't run the process ourselves. We leave that to people like the London Chamber of Arbitration and Mediation, the ICC and such like.
Oh, thank you so very much for that clarification. Can you sort of expand on the training offered by CIArb? Thank you.
Yes, well, I mean, as people have probably gathered, training and education is at the core of what the Institute does. And we have a scheme of what we call the Pathways courses, whereby you can take various, courses, or by practical experience, you can go down the pathways to achieve the status of associate, member, fellow, or chartered status. These are all post-nominal qualifications. And so, like I say, some of them are achieved by going on one of the courses that we run. These are often done online in this day and age, which makes it a lot more economic than it used to be when you had to travel sometimes far and wide to do them. And some of the post-nominals can be achieved at fellowship and chartered status by way of practice. So, for example, if you have been a practitioner and you can produce a certain number of awards that you have written, then you have a peer interview, and if you pass that, then you can achieve fellowship or you can achieve chartered status. So much of what the Institute does is provide that training. It starts from the very simple, a grounding in what is ADR all about, and then it gets more and more complex. One of the most important things in the arbitration context is how to write an award in a way which renders it enforceable. This is something which those who may have been in practice for years and years as counsel, it's quite different when you actually sit as an arbitrator and have to write the award and make sure that it is compliant with the New York Convention and is free from challenge by the courts. And that's part of, everything. One of the most important aspects of getting a post-nominal from the Chartered Institute is that you retain your post-nominal only by paying your subscription on an annual basis. Okay. But in so doing, you have to abide by the Chartered Institute's Code of Ethics. And that's very important, because if you are in breach of the Code of Ethics, you are subject to disciplinary proceedings. So that provides a regulatory framework for the membership around the world. And your post-nominals are recognized on a worldwide basis. So if you become a fellow in Trinidad or in the Caribbean, I will recognize your post-nominal, your fellowship or chartered status, whether I'm in the UK, Nigeria, Kenya, wherever, Singapore, So it has worldwide recognition, and that's the benefit of the training and the post-nominal.
Thank you so very much for that. So how does CIArb handle cybersecurity, and also how have they worked towards increasing diversity among its members and panelists as well?
Two very important questions. I'll take them separately. Yeah. Cybersecurity is with us. It's a critical issue that we have to be aware of all the time in this day and age. If you've been involved in the Vismoot at any stage, the very famous Vismoot, last year's question was all about cybersecurity. And the Chartered Institute in, I think it was 2022, came up with a protocol. This is one of the things the Chartered Institute does. It provides protocols and guidance on how to deal with technology. And in the technology protocol, which you can find online, it deals with how to deal with the difficulties of cybersecurity, data protection, all those difficult issues which arise on a worldwide basis now. So we have protocols and guidelines on how to deal with it. Diversity. We regard ourselves as an inclusive and diverse organization. The green, we have the pledges, and we sign up to those pledges, and we are always working to increase diversity from all points of view, not just gender, but social mobility as well. I think it's very important that all aspects of diversity are dealt with. It's important that people in Africa have as good an opportunity to resolve disputes on an international basis as people from Asia, as people from Latin America, as from Western Europe. It's very important that we all are on a level playing field. It's a tough thing to do. It's hard work, but you have to be committed, and we are committed to doing that. One of my jobs as president is to nominate arbitrators and adjudicators. And I'm afraid that it is still the case that there are far more male people on the list than female. So I'll use this opportunity of encouraging women to join the panel. To be an arbitrator and to be on the president's panel, you have to be a chartered arbitrator. But I encourage people to become chartered and come on the panels so I can nominate you. So it's very important.
Thank you
it's
so
a two-way
much.
street.
Oh, thank you so very much, Mr. Wood, for all your efforts and the work you've put in as a president in sensitizing ADR around the world. More power to your elbow. Well done. Thank you so very much. And also, I would want to add, I think we're running out of time, so I'll just quickly add that this has been a masterclass, and of course, I believe the potential users would embrace all you have stated about the advantages associated with ADR, particularly mediation and arbitration, and would opt for it whenever the need arises, and subsequently members that are yet to be chartered, like myself, would sign up for the training as soon as possible. Thank you so very much for coming on the show. I truly appreciate your insights and perspectives and the learning you've shared with us. Thank you very much, Mr. Wood.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much.
You take care. Bye, Chair.
Bye-bye.
Bye.